out wide. It'll be interesting to say. I think, as I said before, I think it's a good time to come in January for him, because he'll get 4 or 5 months just to get used to the club, but also get used to what I presume might be a higher level of intensity on the training as well. So I don't think any of them would be regular starters for the first few weeks or months. But I think they're very much bought with the sense of that, from the start of next season, they're there from the go as well. I think it is interesting with Armstrong, because in Norway, Deila is, he used to play a bit more of a flat 4-3-3 rather than a 4-2-3-1, which is more what he does now. And I think Armstrong is the kind of player who can do that role really well in a more flat midfield three, and you can have them all doing defensive duties, all doing offensive duties as well. So you don't really have one specific offensive player like Johansen now and one specific defensive one like Bitton, which is a bit more traditional, that you can all a bit more box to box. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic is as well, and you can play it differently in different games. For example, in a European game, you could play Bitton and then maybe Armstrong out wide, because he'll do that job as well. If you're going to keep Chris Cummins in the team as well, I don't think he's going to be as focused maybe and as high work rate defensively if it's not Rangers in a big occasion. So you need maybe another guy other side of the wide who'll put the shift in and do the running for him as well, so you can kind of have that little luxury that is Chris Cummins up front as well.
So I said maybe not straight into the team, but looking forward, ideally, how do you think the midfield now shapes up?
Right now, I would say Brown, Bitton, Johansen, Armstrong, and then you could choose one from a few. Mackay-Steven, I've said before, I'm not a huge admirer of the guy. I've seen him play really well, but other times I've seen him flatter to deceive. But in terms of that, I think ultimately it will be Johansen and Armstrong in the front three. We'll play one up top, and then I think the other place is the one that might be up for grabs. That might not be the case. That's just my personal opinion. I would probably, I don't know. I mean, Stokes, as Ciaran said, he's definitely in Ronnie's plans, and he's been playing well. So maybe he's in possession of the jersey just now, but ultimately it could be somebody a fully fit Forrest or Mackay-Steven fitting in there.
So yeah, I'm still a wee bit working out where Armstrong does fit better, because I've always thought whenever I've seen him for United, I've always thought he was played in the middle behind the striker, basically Johansen's role, and I thought that's where he was more influential. I'd not really seen too many games with him out wide, so I'm not sure how strong he is out wide, or whether his strongest is the centre midfield. Now, whether he's that one behind the forward, or is he the one of the other two kind of slightly holding, that could see a Beaton maybe out, and then it would be Armstrong and Brown together, and Brown would be the holder, because obviously Brown's kind of starting to age. I mean, he's now 30 now, isn't he? So
especially against more defensive teams, I think that might be likely, and you need Bitton in there at that point as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he slots in.
But as we've said, we've got options with Armstrong because he can play in different positions. I think if he did play in the front, the midfield three, I think it would be a bit narrower, because I don't think I've seen him out wide too well. But I think he could, flourish either in, further back or further forward, and that's what makes him quite an exciting purchase.
I think ideally what Celtic want is a midfield attacking three, certainly, and maybe even the whole five of them, who can essentially just switch and move and confuse teams and cover for each other if they find themselves in a position where they're further to the left or to the right or whatever.
I think as well, and for quite a number of teams in the league, we really shouldn't be sitting with two holding midfielders. We really should only have the one, another one, a proper box to box. So you're looking at somebody who is ultimately fit, like Johansen, like Brown. Brown should be that type of player. He's boxed like the old Stan Petrov, box to box, helping out defensively, but also helping out the strikers. We see some offensive work from Brown, but not enough from what he should be. He tends to be too worried about the defensive part and helping out the rest of the defence. But then you've got Beaton and your two centre halves plus your fullback. So Brown should have a bit more faith in his defensive team so that he can be more influential in the last third.
I can kind of see what you're saying, but I think Ronny really seems to like those two, but having the two holders or two more defensive positions, I think that's important when you mentioned fullbacks. When we get fullbacks punting forward like that, we need a bit of backup, a bit of protection in midfield. So I think it's actually probably quite important to have that. And then when we're looking at European games against teams who have maybe spent substantially more than us, we're probably going to need that. So you don't want to be switching to formation that you just aren't really using. So I think it makes sense to play that in the league. I think we've got enough going forward that we're not being uber defensive against smaller teams.
I think it's also important as well that the 4-2-3-1 we seem to have settled in that recently, whereas Deila was changing things more to find out what suited us best. But I think just now we've found a bit of success with this, and it's probably best to kind of bed that in.
And just that kind of, we had the Twitter questions coming in, as I said, St. Pauli D. Somebody, I don't know who, had tweeted from the Cynic about Johansson possibly dropping back. I don't think that's impossible, that would be what Deila does, but I absolutely agree. St. Pauli D saying I don't think that's Johansson's strongest position, essentially, and I would agree with that. I don't think we want Johansson sitting back. He needs to be an offensive midfielder for us, I think. No,
when he did earlier in the season, he was pretty poor at times. I mean, it's easy. It's amazing to think that earlier in the year, I mean, especially the Maribor home game, I think you were here, Christian, as well, and we commented on just how poor he was, especially compared to this first 6 months of last season. I remember you saying, I think Norway played Italy in a friendly, and you said he was the best player in the park, and I think we were all thinking, how is that possible? Because at the time he was so poor, but now he's found his niche within the team, and I certainly wouldn't move him further back, given his previous form and how influential he is where he is just now.
Yeah, and I remember that Maribor game on Sunday, actually, because I thought, this is, after that game, it's probably the most high-pressure game he had in Celtic, and if he would, how would he react to that again as well? And I think he reacted really well, but he didn't used to play as offensively as he does in Celtic, both for Strømsgodset, and he doesn't play that offensively for Norway either. But I also don't think he's the guy who should sit furthest back in the midfield, because I don't think he's tackling and maybe his interceptions are maybe not good enough for that. He often dictates play from a bit deeper with Norway in a more playmaking role, but I think you can maybe have him as, if you have three central midfielders in a scale of who's most offensive and who's most defensive, maybe the middleman there, and he can do that job as well. But I think he's doing really well in his role now. It's still his finishing isn't as good as maybe you want somebody in that role to be, but as I said, he's only played there for 4 or 5 months as well, so it'll be interesting. I think that is the most interesting dynamic in a way, even though I think the midfield players, the wide players are more of a problem. I think the interesting part is how you rotate those three central midfielders and how you play them and who you play there as well.
As I said earlier, very important questions coming up about hair within the squads. Who's got the best hair? We've got Daza asking. Scott Booth, and a rating from 1 to Carlos Valderrama. How good is Stuart Armstrong's hair?
I mean, to be honest, I'd feel pretty guilty commenting on Stuart Armstrong's hair when Gal's not here, because let's be perfectly honest, this is his ultimate sexual fantasy come true.
That may be why he isn't here.
He may be
talk too much for him.
He's probably, he's got a cardboard cutout of Stuart Armstrong, and he's got a wig on it, and he's just fixing it up the way he likes it and stuff like that. But you've got to give it. He's got strong hair. The guy's got strong hair. I'm going to give that to him. I think he's a great addition, hair-wise, to the squad. And
maybe I'm way off, but he kind of reminds me of Adam Lallana hair-wise. Is that a good comparison?
I'm struggling.
Or is it a bit more suave than...
I'm struggling to picture Lallana's hair. I wish if Gal was here with a cardboard cutout, he's probably got several styles and he could put them on top of it. But we realise that hair is of massive importance to us as a podcast, and in terms of presenting Celtic to the world, because you can't just rock up with some sort of shitey mullet or something like that. These days, it's all about.
That's why Stevie May didn't sign. Well, that was the real reason. I mean,
Stevie May. I mean, he looked a bit like a fat biker, and that's really not. That doesn't cut the mustard at Celtic these days. Armstrong, terrific hair. And I think it's kind of put the gauntlet down to Mulgrew to sort his barnet out and get back to the top of his game.
I think we can confirm Lallana's the shape, certainly. There's a bit of Armstrong to it. Personally, I think Armstrong's blown him out of the water when we're talking about texture, we're talking about colour, we're talking about
sexual appeal. Yeah.
Well, it's all there.
If Lallana fails miserably at Liverpool and then at another club, he's got the sort of hair whereby I think we could bring him on board.
There's the potential to improve that hair.
A loan signing, maybe.
It's also very good.
A loan signing, No, what I'm hoping. I think I was a bit more realistic. He needs to fail at several football clubs before he can play for Celtic.
Going off on a hair tangent, one of the greatest things about moving to Scotland from Norway, other than the alcohol prices, is the price of a haircut, because you don't really have a specific barber in Norway, so you'd have to go to a unisex hair salon. And even when I got my haircut in Norway before I moved here, so this is 2001, I was paying £30-40 for a haircut, and Jesus. I came over here and I was paying £6-7, and it was fantastic.
You're getting bummed at £6-7, friend.
Well, actually, I'm going to quite the push barber in Shoalins now that I pay $11.90 for.
Was that Mika?
No, Girasoli.
Girasoli? No. I knew you were going to say that. Skirvin Street. Yeah. Now, I went to Girasoli several years ago, and it was over a tenner at the time, and I went once and never went back.
I really like it. I've used 4 of those loyalty cards now, so that I think I've been there for 47 haircuts or something. So yeah, I'm quite the regular.
Beer? Do you not have a beer while you're having
They've never offered me a beer. Tea, they've offered me. Tea. Tell you what, they have offered me a beer once, but I declined.
Well, there used to be a Barbers down Croft Barbers. It's no longer there. It was only there for a brief period of time. But they had a PlayStation in it. They used to give you a beer, and people used to just hang about in it. Like, I remember a guy came in one day.
Much like Desmond's.
Well, it was like Desmond's, but not quite as London orientated. But
I'm going to call him out. I sit beside a guy at work called Ross, and he's a Celtic fan, but he was admitting to the team here this week that he goes for a £40 haircut sometimes. So I'm just going to put that on the table. And we're still quite shocked.
You mentioned, and fair play, you're used to paying £40, so £11.90. You're laughing. In Scotland, if you pay over a tenner as a man for a haircut, you need a beer. If you're not getting given a free beer, you're walking out there. But you're possibly stabbing somebody.
But this barber is so posh that you have, girls cutting your hair as well. I think that's quite a measure of how posh the barber is.
Is this Girasoli? I don't trust a barber's called Sunflower. So that's.
I didn't know that was.
Yeah, so
my Italian is quite weak. So.
It should be like I don't know, man cut or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
I'll put a shout out for. I go to Denyer on Polkshaws Road.
What he plays for Celtic and he cuts hair.
He cuts hair. I'm sure Chris and his dad have used him a few times. He's a good quality haircut for £7. I'm going to be a dick here and go. But when was the last time you had a haircut? Or was the salon?
What's a dick?
This is definitely been the best 5 minutes of the podcast, by the way.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't even know. I buzz
Where
it
do you
myself.
go about?
I do it myself.
Bathroom.
Yep. Although actually, I did it really quick the other day, and I messed up and I left a little bit, and then I got an emergency haircut off Larry, Big Larry, barber we know.
That's what they call it now.
Just whipped out some clippers. I was sitting at Gal's and I was like, I've missed a bit of my hair. Not a problem, sir. Opened up the pack.
That's probably no thoughts about Glasgow. A pair of
Hey, I was thankful. Anyway,
we need a segue back to football here.
We do. So, and I'm trying to think of a footballer called Larry, and I'm struggling.
I was going to say Larry Holmes, but he was a boxer.
Lillibord,
but there we go.
Basketball player.
So, the square circle, football pitches are squares. Football.
There we go.
What were we talking about? With
the transfers, but then
yeah,
there was a third transfer as well. I don't know. It wasn't quite the last.